Welcome to This Just In with This Just In. As your host, Justin Core. This is a show where we take a deeper dive into the stories and the issues most important to you with the people who bring you those stories. Maybe let you get to know them a little better too. Today, one of our favorite correspondents, maybe our very favorite political expert, Joe Parris for KTVB, returning to the show.
I'm back.
Joe,
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, you don't need to fix the hair. Looks great, buddy.
You got a monitor in here
How-
now.
yeah.
I was
We
coming
do it.
in hot to the studio.
Yeah, little.
Yeah, that's good.
He was like, "I'll be right on time," and then sauntered in about 10 minutes late. That's okay. Yeah, it's fine. I'm not putting you on blast, brother. Yeah, we will wait
There
for
was
you.
a traffic situation on the way in.
In that there was traffic in the morning in the
Yeah.
Treasure Valley.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have been a surprise, but no. Appreciate you making the time.
No problem. I had to be here anyways.
Yeah, they actually pay you to show up.
They do.
So we're gonna get into. Boy, as much as we can happening down at the State House right now, a lot of stuff happening as things starting to wrap up. But first, though,
Yeah.
how's the main event?
The
Your
main
baby,
event,
Finn.
Finn's great. I think Finn's the best. He watches this program, but he did have some feedback.
Helps him sleep?
It does help him sleep. Do you think your show's boring?
No.
I think there's a way we could make it more
Brian
exciting.
might. He sort of came on here and
Do you think there's a way we can make
everybody.
this show a little more exciting? What if we called it This Joe In?
No.
Look at that. That's pretty good. You could text This Joe In to 208-321-5614. Tell us who'd you like to be on the This Joe In show. We like to interview your favorite reporters about the stories they're working on here, and maybe you have a little fun. Hey, Justin, what's your entrance music? Thank you. Welcome to This Joe In with me, Joe.
Unbelievable. I have been betrayed by Ani. You're on notice. Great person. Used to like her. Reminded me of Ani DeFranco, one of our generation's greatest singer-songwriters. Not anymore. Ani, you're on the list. Andy probably had a hand in this. Andy, you're on the list. Brian, I saw you back
I just
there.
think, objectively, this looks better.
This is ridiculous. It
This
actually
Joe
does kind of
In.
look better. I hate to admit, it does look pretty good.
So,
Leave it up.
Justin,
Leave it up.
You're one of my Joe-respondents here.
Joe respondents.
Tell me, what's new on Planet Justin?
Man, the things are going just fine. I'm just fine. But a lot is going on down at the State House. So Joe, you lead it now. It's your show apparently.
This is my show. So should I ask you the questions?
No.
How is your son Finn?
Hold on.
This is my show now.
I got another kid. No.
No.
All right,
But
Joe.
Finn's good. He's gonna enjoy this better because now it's my show, and you got to meet my son.
Oh my gosh, great!
You did. You came over.
Amazing.
Your wife
Yeah.
made you hold him. Justin's like, I don't hold babies.
It's only because I respect them and I worry about dropping them. So
Yeah.
I am never as tense as I am when I'm holding a baby. I'm like, oh boy. But I was sat
No, you did a
down
good
like
job.
on the couch. I was surrounded by soft things.
Yeah.
Wonderful kid.
All right.
He's
well,
having
hey.
his issues now, though,
Is
because
he?
you used to work. Apparently,
Yeah.
you used to work on the morning show. You're used to
did.
being sleep deprived.
Oh boy.
How does it feel to be sleep deprived again?
We
because
were on a roll until the daylight saving thing, where we popped forward an hour because his bedtime was, we'll call it 7 p.m. Mountain Time, and now it's closer to 8 p.m. But there's an hour that my wife and I have to occupy because he's overtired.
Yeah.
He doesn't particularly sleep at daycare, so he's in a great mood when my wife picks him up usually. But it's like
and then things go downhill.
things go downhill. He cannot be calmed down. It got to the point where I'm like, "What do you want? You can have whatever you want. You want to watch TV? What do you want?" And like he doesn't speak. He doesn't speak yet. So
You need one of those baby translators from The Simpsons.
That would be great.
No, I've been there, brother. Where you're like, I will literally give you like you want like $1,000, like I'll make a bank account for you, put it in your account. Just like please go to
I
sleep.
should have told him I have a college savings account for him.
He'll be like, I don't
He'd be
want to go to
thrilled.
college. Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean a new car account for Finn? Yeah.
If they
All right,
still
bro.
have college when he's 18.
Well, they will.
But no,
Well,
being sleep deprived clearly hasn't impacted my work. Because I have a brand new show. Welcome to This Joe In. I'm the Joe host.
that's not.
You could be my Joe host, like
You're
co-host to Joe host instead of a Joe respondent.
You know what? It's just making too good a sense at this point. All right, welcome to this Joe in with your Joe respondent. I'm just sort of like Rod Roddy now. I'm just the announcer. I'm just welcoming people.
You could be Richard Kind
to Joe's show. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
On that new show. So as far as Richard Kind goes, or any announcer, it's about keeping the show moving.
Yeah.
And so let's do
All
that
right. Hey,
now.
Production, thank you so much. This was one of the best days of my life.
You can keep it up.
You can keep it up if you want.
It's fine. You worked really hard on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, you're all traitors and you stabbed me in the back. The State House.
We'll get to heel turns later. But yeah, let's talk some politics.
Okay.
All right.
A lot going on down at the State House.
Yeah.
Tough to really keep everything straight. I'm sure for viewers out there, like, man, it seems like just something new every day, or a couple or two or three things new every day. Been a while since you've been on. Immigration, big issue down there. A couple bills really that a lot of people are talking about. House Bill 83, that might be signed into law at this point. As we're recording, things are moving so quickly. What does that do?
So there's this commentary from some lawmakers, you can imagine it's really lawmakers in the conservative circles, where they believe that the federal government, and really this is pointed at the Biden administration, but they believe that the federal government for years has not done their job and has not held up their role in enforcing immigration. Okay. I'm sure anyone watching this program has heard something about the southern border and the immigration crisis, as some will call it. Others will say that, things have been this way for years. Point of the legislation, though, is essentially empowering local law enforcement to cooperate with ICE, who is federal immigration enforcement. They are trying to get this law passed, and as you mentioned, as of this morning, I haven't seen House Bill 83 being signed by the governor, but it would basically empower local law enforcement to enforce what would be a state crime of illegal presence in the state of Idaho, or illegal entry into the state of Idaho. And the way the legislation is written is, if you got off of a plane and you're here with the visa and you're here to, on vacation, that's fine. But if you're here and you're not supposed to be here and you're working or you're living, there are mechanisms here to basically, if you commit a crime or if you're under investigation for a crime, if it comes up that you are not legally in the country, there's mechanisms to begin what essentially would be a deportation.
Okay, so being in the country illegally is already illegal. It's there in that phrase. Is this necessary?
So it's very interesting as you study the law in terms of the federal law. Illegal presence is not particularly like the criminal. It's not the criminal violation. Act. Okay. It's kind of like the civil offense of, you're in the country and you're not supposed to. If you are not, picked up while you're crossing any border illegally, it gets a little intricate between federal law and state law. So lawmakers have kind of targeted this enforcement to people who they say are bad actors, who are criminals. I think there's been this acknowledgement at the State House that there are entire industries that do run on, labor and cooperation with people who may not be legally in this country. And Senator Ruckty, for example, said in committee, we can't really endorse crime. You can't really endorse illegal immigration. However, we have industries like agriculture, like dairy operations that are very much built on that labor. And because of that, prices at the grocery store are lower than they could be. So it's a difficult conversation because you have the lawmakers who correctly point out that people are illegally in the country, and that it's a violation. They want to make a state crime. However, the businesses depend on this labor because Americans are not working these jobs.
Yeah. And so the dairymen, again, for years have talked about how we need to make it easier for folks to get work visas and then maybe a path to citizenship. And that's been tough for them to get through because people have pretty hard lines against this sort of immigration. There's also a bill that would limit services to undocumented immigrants, say it like healthcare, soup kitchens. Talk to me about that.
So this is also a difficult conversation because, first of all, the legislation, again, the idea behind it is we shouldn't be using American dollars to support people that are not Americans. And that is just one train of belief. You can agree with that or not. The concept here is that unless someone shows up at an emergency room, they would allow them to still get emergency medical care.
Right.
They shouldn't be benefiting from taxpayer services. They shouldn't be benefiting for services that are for Americans and that are funded by the government because they're not citizens in the United States. And you can argue about, do they pay taxes? Do they contribute to the community? The point here is that there's this federal move, and there's really the signaling from the White House that states like Idaho, all the states, should be working to cut waste and cut spending and to use resources more appropriately. And there are those of the belief that if you're not in this country legally, you should not benefit from the resources that are created for American citizens. And again, as you can imagine, these are very controversial topics. But yeah, it would cut resources, social services, resources, benefits. And it's a tough reality for families that are going through very difficult times right now. And I know you had Brenda Rodriguez on this show, and she interviewed, a family that has undocumented workers in the family that also have kids that were legally born in the United States. I know birthright citizenship still a major conversation. So it's a tough conversation because you can see in terms of the black and white letter of the law, the point that lawmakers are trying to make. But then you can hear the critics who make okay, that's fine, it's written this way, but in reality, here's how this plays out. There are critics of cutting social services that say this is going to end up costing more because you're going to have situations where someone could have had a social service. It could help them improve their life and have a better outcome for them, their family, and the community. Whereas if you start cutting services, you might push people to have to do drastic things. So we'll see how this plays out. I know that there is enough support at the State House within, the heavy Republican majority to get these passed. And you can see both sides. You can understand why some people want to enforce the letter of the law in black and white, and there are those gray areas that are pointed out by critics.
So really interesting, controversial issue there. But before the session even started, you and I both said that really the issue this session was going to be school choice. And sure enough, we were right.
We were right.
Joe.
Wow, what a take.
I would argue that we were right. Good for us. That's why you're the political insider. The parental choice tax credit bill, that is now law. Before we get into it, let's take a look at a story that you did right after it was signed. Roll.
That means it is fair, responsible, transparent, and accountable.
Governor Brad Little set the stage in his Keeping Promises State of the State address.
Yeah, I came here with this commitment in my heart to make sure that every child has the opportunity for an excellent education.
Representative Wendy Horman co-sponsored the bill, a bill that passed out of committee on February 5th after critical questioning. Questions continued on the House floor.
A well-designed program would include a robust oversight and clear reporting and proper funding for enforcement, of which none of this bill provides.
How is it school choice when private schools get to selectively choose their students?
The people showed up with their thoughts on February 13th. A Senate committee heard the full pitch from co-sponsor Senator Lori Den Hartog.
No one school, no one system is going to be the exact right fit for every single child. And so having options and opportunities that families can access really it's powerful.
President Trump chimed in on social media as the proposal went through technical transmittal, an endorsement for Governor Little and the proposed school choice measure, even catching the bill sponsor by surprise.
It's not every day you have a president of the United States endorse your bill.
This bill is not the boogeyman.
February 19th marked the final decision day for lawmakers.
This bill isn't about school choice. It is simply cutting a blank check for a certain few using taxpayer dollars.
It passed, a narrow vote of 20-15. The final hurdle cleared on the run to the governor's desk.
The only part of what I said that I really agreed with was the price of it. There's not enough accountability in it. But to that mind, I don't think there's enough accountability in the money we give public schools either.
February 27th, the end of the road. A press release announced that governor was signing it into law. Representative Horman finding out only a short time before.
I got a phone call. I was down in House Education Committee presenting a bill.
A successful campaign that took years to complete, one that Representative Horman says can make a difference.
Elation. This is something I've worked on for so many years. I'm so excited for the families and the children that this will benefit in the state of Idaho, especially those of modest means.
Still, there are questions, ones that Representative Steve Birch has asked since the first committee hearing.
Very disappointed.
Concerns hang for critics of 93, worries about expansion, a runaway program.
Any dollar that winds up going to a private school or a religious school, whether it's in the form of a voucher or whether it's elected to go into the general fund, is one less dollar for public education.
Horman believes the program won't negatively impact public schools, something she keeps close to her heart.
So I have 30 years of supporting public schools. That's not going to change. We are still going to make investments in public schools in Idaho. And again, this money takes no money away at all from public schools.
Others wonder if the governor kept his promise, his outline for a successful program.
That it needed to be fair, it needed to provide accountability, responsibility, and transparency. By any definition of those 4 words, this bill does none of that. It's really a promise broken to the citizens of Idaho.
There's a lot of work to do to make sure that families are aware of this program and getting the word out about that. And so in one way, the work is just really beginning.
So I'm sure you thanked Kevin, the photog, first off, for getting a lot of shots of your bald spot. That's okay. A lot of great men are bald, like The Rock.
Well, I'm balding. See, because
thank you for correcting.
If I sit up straight, nobody knows. But when people see me in the grocery store, they're like, "Oh, well, you're not that tall, and you're losing your hair. Oh, you don't remind me of my grandson. My grandson has a full head of hair."
Through the magic of television, we can hide that. Yeah. Oh no, see a little bit of it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Me though, full head of hair, no big deal.
Are you thinning at all? No, you're doing good actually.
You wish. Graying though. You got 2 teens. When Finn is a teen, you're going to see a lot more of this.
Just for men?
If you have any left. No. I keep that on there. Makes me look more distinguished. The governor said for a school choice law, as we transition back to actually talking about the news, governor said that a school choice bill, now law, had to check a number of boxes. He said, though, that this particular bill, now law, checked 1. So why did he sign it?
That's a great question, and it's a question that we have tried to ask the governor himself, and I guess I'll just speculate. There was a lot of pressure, especially coming from the White House. You may remember that.
And you saw that in the package.
You saw that in the package, yep. President Trump, tweeting or truth socialing about Idaho and Governor Little. So you understand that there's a lot of pressure on the governor to sign this. 2, this is something that lawmakers have wanted to get done for years, and nothing had gotten to his desk in several attempts. I think you can look back 4 or 5 years in terms of these programs. And they went through different iterations, vouchers, ESAs, whatever. Finally getting to his desk, his hands, whether he liked it or not, and I'm just speculating. I haven't had the opportunity to ask him personally about it. He kind of had to sign this. Now, you can read into a lot of different circumstances that people have pointed out. For example, there wasn't a big bill signing ceremony. There was just a press release that went out announcing that this had happened. Again, there was no opportunity yet to do interviews about it. It kind of just was signed into law and everybody moved on. So you can read into that however you want. I think at some point we'll certainly get an opportunity to talk to him about it. But regardless of how you feel, it is soon the law of the land beginning in January of 2026. Families can try and apply for this. As we highlighted, there is a cap of how much money can be sent out at $50 million. So if you do the math, not every family who applies may get it. And there is priority for lower income families below the federal poverty level. So we'll see how it plays out. I'm sure that there will be possible court challenges we could see to it. There are still people that believe this may violate the Sectarian Clause in the state constitution, which, long story short, says that public money can't go to private or religious schools. Will a tax credit...
It says that specifically.
It does, yeah. Does the tax, but you're not sending tax dollars to the religious schools. And you're sending tax dollars to the families who are paying the religious schools.
Gotcha.
And is that enough of a avoidance?
So let's make that distinction, because this is different than a lot of bills that have been tried before. This is not a voucher, an ESA, like you said. This is a tax credit. So it was at least closer to what the governor talked about in his State of the State, and that what it was going to be, the $50 million, a tax credit, so that they're not funneling necessarily from the education budget right to private schools or religious schools, but it's families who pay for private school, religious school, and then on their taxes they claim it and could claim $5,000
up to $5,000. Yeah. And it's not that you just get the $5,000. You have to have expenses, which tuition likely for a private or religious school. I'm sure you know that if you look into private schools, $5,000 will get you so far, but that's not all of it.
I looked into it enough to know that kids are going to public school. But also, we did look around, and you're going to be hard pressed to find a private school that charges that little.
Yeah, and private schools have the opportunity and the ability to say, okay, if this is the situation you're in, you can come to our school for whatever amount they make up.
There are scholarships.
It's between the family and the school. Sure. I can just say there's a very popular private school in our area that tuition's $8,000 a year. Okay. Ostensibly $3,000 for a low-income family. They would have to make sacrifices. And we've heard from families that said, we would be willing to make sacrifices so that we could send our kids to a better school. And this is, it's not for every family. And I think, when you hear from the sponsors and the supporters of House Bill 93, they say, we're not trying to replicate the public school system because it doesn't work for some families. So we'll see. Yeah. It is one of these things where we could talk about it all day long. I guess we're going to find out, though, starting in January of next year.
Well, again, you said, though, probably court challenges as well. And that's been really kind of the rallying cry for people behind this legislation, that it's like, public school doesn't work for every family, so we're going to do this. And this also is not going to work for every family, but it's a whole other option that they hope works for more families. And Horman said the work just beginning. So are there more plans for more of this, more legislation on school choice? Probably not this year, but
I think specifically that soundbite in the context of the interview was, now you start administering the program. Okay. Legislative Services Office and the state accountants, the Department of Revenue, not Department of Revenue, what do we call them at the state level?
Commerce?
The Tax Commission, thanks.
Oh, okay.
They're going to be working on auditing and transparency on the program, and LSO will send out the parental survey. So now you're going to start actually seeing the work get done. In terms of expansions of the program, it's like any piece of legislation where a future legislature could come back and they could add more to it. They could cut away from it. They could put more parameters on it. I mean, hypothetically, one of the concerns is, okay, well, the spending could, be out of control. Well, it's capped at $50 million. That doesn't mean a future legislature can't change that. Well, the concern is fraud. Okay, well, if families are using money illegally, okay, well, then we would put new strings in boxes you need to check on it. So we'll find out. The sponsor, Representative Horman, told me she's happy to come back to the table next year if it turns out something's not working and they need to fix it. It's like any piece of legislation. You could talk to any lawmaker in the building, not specifically about House Bill 93, but in general. There's no such thing as a perfect bill. It is a very difficult world to navigate, and I appreciate how difficult being a lawmaker can be. I would not want to be one myself.
So you're not running?
No way. I'm good.
You heard it here first. We also said another big issue this year. Again, we were right. Going to be Medicaid reform, and it is. Where does that stand right now? What would it do?
So there was several versions of this, and the final version of what would end up being Medicaid restrictions and regulations sitting on the governor's desk right now. It very quickly, in 7 working days, passed the House and the Senate. To be fair, that is quick, but to be fair, there were several conversations about Medicaid in both chambers.
Sure.
Because of the previous 4 or 5 versions of it came through. So this latest version has a work requirement. It has an opportunity for getting premium tax credits instead of kind of the traditional Medicaid reimbursement. So there are, I guess, guardrails is what sponsors would call them in terms of potentials to cut funding. There is a biannual requirement for reporting to make sure you're eligible. Critics worry that this pile of paperwork for people to go through twice a year could compromise care. If you've never applied for Medicaid before, it can be an hour-long process. You need to have an expert with you. Yeah. So if you have to do, this eligibility check twice a year, it could be difficult. And the concern is if somebody misses a deadline or they file their paperwork wrong, they're off the program. So we'll see how it plays out. Again, though, it did clear the House and Senate, waiting for the governor's signature. Good chance it gets signed off on. But this latest version does not have a mechanism that would repeal Medicaid expansion, which previous versions did. Critics of the latest version will say this is better, but then they would tell you what other issues they can see with it, which are fair.
Right. And again, Medicaid expansion was voted on by the people of Idaho and passed. So that would be tough to get a full just repeal going through. Idahoans also going to get tax cuts, the largest income tax in state history. Speaker of the House, Mike Moyle, very proud of that. Property tax cut still on the table. I mean, just a lot of tax cuts. At the last total, it was going to be what, 400 million, some odd?
453 million in proposed tax cuts.
And the governor
benefits.
in the state of the state said he wanted 100 million in tax cuts. So this more than quadruples that.
Yeah, and I've heard public and private concerns from what I would say key players about if the math is going to work out on this. So we will find out.
So nobody likes paying taxes. So
Certainly not.
I think a lot of people hear that and they're like, that's awesome. But the critics do say it's like, look, we still have to have a balanced budget. That's actually required in the state constitution. They can't sine die until they balance that budget. And they're like, we're not sure we're going to have enough money to pay for schools and roads.
We will find out.
We will find out.
JFAC had a projection of $6 billion, and their projection looks like the numbers would work, but it's a projection. I mean, if the revenue comes in higher, great. If it comes in lower, there could be problems. I think we'll keep an eye on JFAC for the next several weeks because things are interesting there. That's a tease to a future episode if I'm allowed to come back.
We'll see how this finishes up. All right, before we wrap up, let's talk about one of the top stories of the year. John Cena, not John Cena, as Andy called him earlier today. No big deal. John Cena, there he is, consummate good guy. Both of us shirtless, look exactly the same. In pro wrestling,
concerning vein on you?
not mine, not at all. It looks normal. Consummate good guy in pro wrestling turned bad guy. A number of pundits in politics said it sort of mirrored politics. So, Joe, no better person to ask than an expert on both wrestling and politics. How does wrestling and politics sort of mirror each other?
It's the same thing. It's two sides of the same coin. The only difference between politics and wrestling is one is a show and one is a show that has very serious life consequences. Look, there's a reason that Donald Trump became president. People like personality. People like to follow stories and people that they can invest in. And I can tell you that characters. And Donald Trump, whether you agree with him politically or not, he captured an entire segment of the United States with his charisma and his policies. But his charisma is something that people attach to, and that's what the pro wrestling business is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why boring politicians are not the ones you see on TV anymore. Everyone's exciting. Everyone's trying to make a headline. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, anywhere in the middle, the most popular politicians online are the ones that have the best sound bites and are the most interesting to follow. And that's just the way it is. There are hundreds of members of Congress that we can't name because they're not out there trying to be charismatic.
But people know who Marjorie Taylor Greene and AOC are.
Because personalities.
Because they connect.
Remember, one of the criticisms of Joe Biden was that he was not interesting enough.
Well,
which in politics, is that the correct thing to believe? That is up to you, but you get a vote if you want to vote. So there you go.
And the president, also WWE Hall of Famer. Not a coincidence. If you got comments or questions, text them to 208-321-5614. That's also the number for 208, but don't hashtag that. Hashtag Justin. Joe, thank you so much.
Thanks for being on my show.
Thanks for watching this Joe In.